On December 3rd, Detroit became the largest city to declare bankruptcy in American history. The case, which went on for 4 months, protected the city from its creditors. While some government officials blame Detroit's financial woes on a declining tax base, other observers say runaway spending was the main cause. The city had an estimated $18 billion in debt at the time bankruptcy was declared. The money paid out when the city was healthy did not produce significant results for the people of the Motor City. Over 40% of streetlights in Detroit do not work. There are also 80,000 abandoned buildings in the city. A judge ruled Detroit could cut pensions in order to pay other creditors, and this is raising a firestorm of controversy among those who were due to get paid. Observers are questioning who will pay the debt Detroit incurred before entering bankruptcy. And Ellen Brown, she's a well-respected attorney who writes for the Huffington Post, and Brown is the author of 12 books, including The Web of Debt and The Public Banking Solution. Brown is our guest on the show today, and we'll be talking about the Detroit bankruptcy and the role played by pensions and public banks in the events unfolding in the Motor City. We'll also discuss the future of municipal bankruptcies and what can be done to avoid them. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you.
Ellen, what caused Detroit to go bankrupt?
Many things, principally deindustrialization. But the particular issue that I've written about is the fact that they have these quite expensive interest rate swaps that they had entered into with Wall Street banks, three big Wall Street banks particularly, that along with many other cities, they've been ripped off with these interest rate swaps, where they're financial products that are sold to municipalities as if they're a form of insurance that protects against interest rates going up. But what the banks haven't told these politicians who buy into these interest rate swaps is that they're really gambling, they're really speculating. And if they lose the bet, they could lose a lot of money. And that's what's happened to various cities. What happened was the interest rates dropped precipitously low. Instead of going high, which is what the bet was supposedly to protect against, the Federal Reserve, which is the head of the banking system acting on behalf of the banks, dropped the prime rate to 0.25%, to ridiculously low levels. So that meant that these cities wind up paying Wall Street rather than the reverse on these bets that they effectively lost. And because of the Bankruptcy Reform Act of 2005, which was also pushed through by large Wall Street banks, the derivatives players, the banks that are on the other side of these derivatives bets, get to go first in bankruptcy. So it's not like what you think of, where bankruptcy is just where you say, well, we don't have enough money, and so we're putting all the money in a pool, and then we'll divide it equally among all the claimants. Some claimants now get to go first and to take their whole cut before the others are left with the remains to divide up among themselves. And so the banks, under the Bankruptcy Reform Act, get to grab all the collateral first on these derivatives claims.
Now, Ellen,
and that leaves the pensioners holding the bag. And these are people that have worked for 30 years for the city, and they need that pension. They don't get Social Security with their Detroit pensions. They only were getting those pensions, and those could get substantially cut or wiped out.
Ellen, are we seeing any other cities follow the same path as Detroit?
Illinois, I guess, has now, just seeing what happened in Detroit, they are now cutting the pensions of their pensioners. And so that's being taken as a precedent that it's all right for cities to cut pensions, perhaps to avoid bankruptcy, to avoid this result.
Well, the effects of the deindustrialization of Detroit, is that simply isolated to Detroit, or could a city like Chicago befall the same fate?
Many cities are in nearly as bad shape as Detroit, and Chicago is one, and New York is another. I live in Los Angeles. There are many cities that are threatened, and when they see this precedent, when they see that they can get rid of this very large pension obligation just by filing bankruptcy, they're liable to do the same thing.
So how will this bankruptcy affect the people of Detroit, not the pensioners, but the people?
The bankruptcy itself was, the city was put into bankruptcy by an emergency manager. So it was not the mayor, it was not the city council, but it was this emergency manager, Kevin Orr, who was appointed by the governor, Rick Snyder, who is a Republican, and the city of Detroit did not want him. It was 20-1 they voted against him in the election, and they don't want this city manager deal either, which they also voted against in a referendum. So these people are going to be suffering under a city manager who is paying off a budget that has been declared in distress. And so they're allowed to do things like pay off, or he can do whatever he wants.
You say that people are going to be suffering. How so? How is this suffering actually going to befall the people of Detroit? I mean, we're talking about the streets are just not going to be paved with any longer, or grocery stores, or I mean, how is the suffering is going to unfold in a bankrupt city?
Well, they will be selling off their assets. One asset is the Detroit Museum, I guess, Art Museum has some wonderful artworks that are liable to get privatized, and they can sell off all sorts of public buildings and sell off public utilities, make them privatized. And typically when things like water and power are privatized, the people wind up paying more for it.
So who's going to pay the bill for Detroit's $18 billion debt?
Well, that's a debt that's far in the future. So that's another thing that's not, well, there was a study by Demos that found that the whole bankruptcy was actually trumped up, that they are not nearly as indebted as they appear to be, and they're counting things as debts that don't count in a bankruptcy. I mean, in a bankruptcy, you only count what you need to pay off your immediate debts, not what you need in 30 years. So it was really trumped up in order to get rid of public assets, to get rid of, probably largely to get rid of these pension fund obligations. The pension fund obligations were incurred at a time when you could make 8% in the market. And so I'm not sure how it happened in Detroit, but I know in California, our pension funds managers said that don't worry, we're not going to charge the taxpayers. We're going to make X amount of money in the market. Well, that didn't happen because the market crashed. And again, that was the fault of the banks. But the banks are not having to pay. The banks get their pound of flesh no matter what, and it's the people who pay.
Ellen, we're up against a break, and I want to, when we come back, I want to discuss the revitalization of Detroit, what can be done to stimulate that, but we do need to take this break. Stay tuned for more. We're talking with author Ellen Brown right here on WHDT World News.